In this video we visit 3 different buildings within a few hundred metres of each other. A mill, a row of cottages and a large house, all 3 sadly derelict and abandoned. Our first stop is Bosley Mill. Unfortunately I'm unable to explore it, but to tell the history of our other 2 properties we need to explore the history of here and the tragedy that unfolded one day in 2015. Originally in Bosley there were 2 mills that came to be known as Lower Works and Upper Works. Bosley Mill was known as Upper Works or Dane Mill, after the River Dane that it sits beside. The works had a long history. 2 water mills were built on the River Dane around 1760 by Charles Rowe to process copper and brass. Later both mills were converted to process silk and cotton, and later still to grind corn. They closed in the 1920s, but Upper Works reopened in the 1930s for their final task of grinding wood into a fine flour to make linoleum, bakelite and explosives. In later years, Lower Works became a mica factory. Mica is used in the paint manufacture industry. Bosley Village has always been known for its mills, which provided work for local families for centuries. They were built to refine copper and brass that was produced at a smelting plant owned by a gentleman called Charles Rowe of Macclesfield. The 3rd Earl of Harrington, after whose family the local pub is named, owned the land and leased it to Charles Rowe. He had several cottages built at both works for the working families. James Brindley, well known locally for his engineering works, designed the pulleys and weirs to drive the water wheels, which powered the engines. That in turn drove the rollers to make the sheet copper. This sheeting was used on the hulls of ships which were built of timber at the time. In the early 19th century, the mills were sold and began a period of silk throwing and cotton spinning. Mid-century saw change again when both mills were converted to corn milling. There were 3 millers and a silk throster recorded as working at the mills in 1860. Goods at this time were moved by narrow gauge tram line to a nearby wharf on the local canal, which ran from Marple to Kidsgrove, which had opened in 1831. Later, goods were transported by a train link to join with the Macclesfield to Stoke-on-Trent line. A station was built in Bosley in 1846 at what is now known as Jubilee Shed, near Station House on Tunstall Road. The track and station were closed in 1964 as part of the Lord Beeching's cuts. Corn continued to be milled until the 1930s. Then the works became Wood Treatment Limited, which ground wood flour, sawdust and wood shavings, then mica and coconut shell. Wood Treatment Limited was owned by the Thompson family, comprising of 4 brothers and a sister. All the brothers took an active part in the business. The wood treatment business continues under the ownership of the Bowden Group since 2008, and some areas of the mills have been let to other firms, notably for granite worktops, pallet refurbishment and car repairs, etc. The wood flour mill was running up until 2015, when one day production took a tragic turn. An article from 2021 reads, "A totally inadequate managing director of a wood mill where 4 people died in a blast has been fined and given a suspended prison sentence. George Bowden, 65, was given a 9-month prison sentence, suspended for 18 months, and fined £12,000. Dorothy Bailey, Derek William Barks, Derek Moore and Jason Shingler died in the blast in Bosley, Cheshire in 2015. The firm was fined £75,000. Matthew Bailey, whose mother died in the blast, said the fine was nothing. He said, "It's been nearly 6 years. It's every day you wake up and think about your parents, and if this nightmare is ever going to end." Mill owner George Bowden, 65, was handed a 9-month prison sentence, suspended for 18 months. Bowden of Church Road, Stockport, had originally been charged with gross negligence manslaughter, but was acquitted in April. He pleaded guilty to being the director of a company which committed an offence under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. The company, Wood Treatment Limited, admitted a health and safety charge last year and was fined £75,000. Wood Treatment Limited had been charged with corporate manslaughter, but those charges were also dropped halfway through the trial. At Chester Crown Court, Judge Mrs Justice May described Bowden as a totally inadequate managing director and said the task had been beyond him. She added the firm was woefully wanting in the discharge of its basic obligations. After sentencing, Ms Bailey's second son, Ed, said losing their mother had left a big hole in our lives. He branded the sentencing a joke and a kick in the teeth. I don't think justice has been finalised, he said. Jim Randall, who was working at the mill that day after a 39-year career there, also attended the sentencing hearing. I'm disappointed, he said. The fines are mediocre, to say the least. I thought the sentencing was very weak indeed. We knew when the judge said there was no case to answer that today wouldn't bring an end to it. It's never going to end now for the victims. The exact cause of the fatal blast in July 2015 is not known, but it was thought to have involved an explosion of wood dust, the trial heard. Ms Bailey, 62, from Bosley, was a cleaner at the site. Mr Barks, 51, from Leek, was a maintenance fitter. Mr Moore, 62, of Golden Hill, Stoke-on-Trent, was a maintenance fitter, and Mr Shingler, 38, of North Road, whose body was never recovered, was a charge hand. Others were said in an earlier court hearing to have received horrendous injuries. Prosecutor Tony Badenoch, QC, said the company cut costs at the expense of safety and there was a continuing history of smouldering fires and explosions at the site. Simon Antrobus, QC, defending Bowden, said just because his client had denied he was guilty of manslaughter did not mean the explosion has not weighed on his shoulders heavily. He also added his client was dyslexic, so struggled with paperwork. I also found an article written in a health and safety magazine that goes into much greater detail regarding the blatant disregard for health and safety Mr Bowden had. At 9:11 a.m. on the morning of July the 17th, 2015, fire bells went off at both the Cheshire Fire and Rescue Services Macclesfield and Congleton fire stations. Responders noted the location, Wood Treatment Limited, at Bosley Mill in Congleton. As they rushed into their gear, piled into fire trucks and left the station for the 2-alarm blaze at Wood Treatment Limited, with sirens screaming. Wood Treatment Limited manufactured a variety of wood fibre, wood flour and wood powder products, which meant that combustible dust was a frequent byproduct and health and safety offence at the wood treatment facility. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, wood flour, also known as wood meal, is a finely powdered wood or sawdust that has a similar texture, size and appearance to cereal flour. It's made by pulverising dried wood, often from scraps, using a hammer mill. The wood is then screened so that the particles are small enough to pass through the screen and into a discharge chute. After pulverisation, the wood flour is filtered to remove lumps and ensure a consistent consistency. As fire crews raced to the site, they may have anticipated a major event, but probably not the scene of mass destruction and massive explosion that awaited. A huge fire engulfed the wood flour mill buildings. A crowd stood in the road, dazed and shell-shocked. There were obvious casualties. Some people were receiving medical care, while others walked around with visible burn injuries. One Cheshire Fire and Rescue officer described the scene at Wood Treatment Limited as something like out of the movies. A member of the urban search and rescue team was equally shocked. The scale of the incident is unprecedented in this country in the last 10 years, he later said. 3 explosions destroyed the mill and killed 4 of its workers. It took several days before the fires were suppressed enough for the investigators and rescue teams, health and safety, to enter the site. By that point, the wood flour mill at Wood Treatment Limited was destroyed by at least 3 explosions from wood dust and a dust cloud. A primary dust explosion occurred within the process, stirring up previously settled dust within the mill, leading to a large secondary dust explosion. More than 800 tonnes of rubble was moved and police divers were deployed to underground culverts in an attempt to find missing people alive. Firefighters didn't leave the wood dust explosion site for over a month. Officials logged 4 injuries and 4 deaths. The dead were mill worker Derek Moore, 62, Dorothy Bailey, 62, William Barks, 51, and Jason Shingler, 38. Unfortunately, Shingler's body was never found. The local Member of Parliament, David Rutley, spent time at the site. He later recalled it was like a war zone and described the tragedy as the darkest day yet in his time as MP. A fund for the victims and their families was set up by the local councillor. While this measure helped address some of the financial losses, it did not and never could compensate for the lives of the 4 people lost. For justice to take place, the authorities had to step in. Safety was a long-standing concern at the Bosley mill. Combustible wood dust had apparently been a long-standing issue at Wood Treatment Limited. On February 13, 2013, Sheila Smith, a director of risk management who had been retained by company director George Bowden to draw up necessary health and safety documentation, sent him an email. Smith, who had been familiar with the wood flour mill for years, expressed concerns over what she called considerable amounts of wood dust and unacceptable dust issues at the facility and many health and safety offences. She was not exaggerating. According to reports, broken down machinery would have wood dust pouring out of it, sometimes up to a metre high, with previous settled dust. In addition, machines were allegedly not fixed until they were completely broken. There was no scheduled maintenance as the machines were not permitted to stop for that purpose. Second-hand parts were applied as temporary fixes. There was a reluctance to use approved outside contractors for specialised maintenance. Cleaning staff had been cut from a team to one lady, Dorothy Bailey, who died in the explosion. In 2012, there had apparently been an effort to introduce fire risk assessments for Wood Treatment Limited. The mill also had spark detection equipment, but it was not functioning properly, compromising its ability to act as an explosion mitigation measure. Investigators also learned there had been fires at Wood Treatment Limited in the past. Weeks before the explosion at the wood flour mill, a motor buried under piles of wood dust caught fire. By leaving the issue uncorrected had led to increased health and safety offences and a dust explosion hazard. After an extensive investigation by Cheshire Constabulary and the National Health and Safety Executive, Wood Treatment Limited was charged with corporate manslaughter in November 2019. In addition, company director George Bowden was charged with 4 counts of gross negligence manslaughter. 2 mill managers, Philip Smith and Peter Shingler, pleaded not guilty to an offence under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Inspections revealed a significant dust explosion hazard with risks of devastating secondary explosions. The report stated, "While normal business operations do not result in significant dust explosions, there is a risk that a small explosion or other disturbance may cause settled dust to become airborne, causing a dust cloud and perhaps in sufficient concentration to provide an explosive mixture. Typically, secondary explosions are devastating." Tyler Eastwood told the court that he had visited the wood mill in July 2014 to carry out vibration analysis. He noted that the wood treatment and wood mill site was dusty, with some motors buried in dust, and that vibration in some of the machinery was way outside industry standard. When he visited again in August, he noted some improvements, but by October, health and safety conditions had deteriorated again at the wood mill and wood treatment facility. Conditions at the mill kept deteriorating despite warnings from experts. One worker said that the rooftop dust collector for Plant 2 had experienced an explosion so intense that it bent the metal door. Despite this near miss, he said very few employees, if any, had been told formally or in any detail about the health and safety offences and risks of explosions in the wood mill. A principal health and safety inspector said that the dangerous substances and explosive atmospheres regulations assessment, although present, was neither suitable nor sufficient. Mr. Badenoch told the jury, "By its very nature, industrial processing on a site of this kind is dangerous. For that reason, maintenance of machinery and a safe working environment is essential. Failures to adhere to basic maintenance in an industrial environment of this kind can have disastrous consequences." He pointed out that the machinery in the riverside area of the wood flour mill, where waste was routinely discharged into the River Dane, was in such poor repair that the fan had to be chained to the floor to prevent it moving around. Because it was chained to the floor, it was called the Riverside Dog. During the trial, the following scenarios were presented as possible causes for the tragedy. A dust explosion occurred within the process, stirring up settled dust within the wood mill and leading to a large secondary dust explosion. A piece of equipment or pipe failed, releasing a dust cloud that made contact with an ignition source and exploded. This event stirred up dust and caused a second explosion. A piece of equipment released air or steam, stirring up dust and raising a cloud that exploded. Or the high voltage switchgear within the mill experienced an explosive failure, stirring up dust and causing a large secondary dust explosion. Mr. Badenoch told the jurors the most likely scenario is one of the first two, an explosion in previously settled dust leading to a much larger secondary explosion. Whichever of those credible scenarios it is, the prosecution case is that each arose from negligence on the part of the company and the health and safety director, i.e. George Bowden. The prosecution alleged negligence on the part of the company and the health and safety director. Before the case could go to the jury, it was unexpectedly discharged on January 28, 2021. All that a spokesman from Chester Crown Court would say was that there was personal issues concerning the judge. Nearly 2 weeks later, on February the 8th, a new judge and jury were sworn in. Once again, witnesses told their stories. One worker recalled how he and a co-worker were fired after he refused to clean an area of the wood mill he believed to be dangerous and a health and safety offence. He said the dust in the area was up to his knees and made the working areas unbreathable. Another worker said the dust in the riverside area was sometimes packed up as tall as me, adding that he was over 6 feet tall. He said the cleaner, Dorothy Bailey, did her best, but it was more than a one-person job. On March the 10th, former purchasing manager Alan Seddon told the court that the staff were fighting a losing battle at the mill from 2013 to the time he left in February 2015. He said he had raised concerns with George Bowden about the dust, only to be told there was no money to address it. 12 weeks later, on April 29th, the judge directed the jury to find Philip Smith and Peter Shingler not guilty of any charges. The manslaughter charges against Bowden and Wood Treatment Limited were also dropped, but both pleaded guilty to a health and safety offence, so proceedings continued until June the 18th, when Bowden was given a 9-month prison sentence, suspended for 18 months, fined £12,000 and banned from being a company director for 4 years. The firm was fined £75,000. The outcome was £75,000 in fines, but no prison time. The judge described Bowden as a totally inadequate managing director and said that Wood Treatment Limited was woefully wanting in the discharge of its basic obligations. However, the criticism and the sentences were not enough for the victims' families. 6 years after the Bosley mill explosion, families still grieve. The dangerous conditions and the health and safety offence at the mill were observed by employees and condemned by safety professionals, but nothing was done, even after at least one dust collector explosion occurred. Whether it was due to ignorance on the part of management or lack of money or both, 4 people went to work on the morning of July the 17th, 2015, fully expecting to go home to loved ones at the end of the day. They didn't. Until the dangers of combustible dust are fully realised, more people are going to clock in unaware that they'll be working their final shift with a health and safety offence at their facility. Any mistakes in health and safety offences need to be identified and addressed before they become tragedies. Looking through the gates of the mill, you can make out where the explosion took place, and it seems they're still clearing away the rubble and wood some 10 years later. The 4 people who were killed were in this area, but the explosion caused damage beyond the confines of the mill. If we look across the road, we can see a row of workers' cottages. These were evacuated just after the explosion, as there were fears of further explosions. They now sit empty, and I am sure when the occupants were told to completely move out. Were they told to as the buildings were unsafe, or because the mill had to close and the occupants had to find work elsewhere? I don't know. So I'm just stood outside the row of cottages that was damaged in the blast. So these were probably original workers' cottages. As you can see up there, the windows have been blown out. I'm not going to go into them all because they're all pretty much the same layout. But this one here, the door's open, so we'll have a look inside this one. So this was the kitchen. So just the two rooms on the ground floor. There is a hole down there. Not sure if it had a basement. And then the stairs up. I'll have a quick look. I'm not sure how safe it is up there. So we've got one bedroom here. You can see there's still clothes and stuff. Looks like the copper thieves have been in. They left Peter Andre's book. Don't know why. You can see how close they are to the mill over there where the explosion was. And then got a little bathroom here. And then we've got some more stairs. I'll have a quick look up there. Wow, and then we've got a big room up here, which I presume could have been their lounge. They could have used it as a lounge maybe. It's a big room. You can see the old beams. Yeah. So a nice compact 3-storey house. So we'll just have a look through the windows of these houses. I'm not going to climb in them all. As you can see, everything's pretty much damaged inside now. This one's pretty bad inside, look. Another one here. There's a fish tank or something over there. And then another one here. Oh dear. Got the mugs still on the telly. And then the last one on the end of the row here. So this is just around the back of the row of cottages. Before we move on, I just want to give a huge shout out to the guys from Goes-on-Trent for trusting me and sharing this location with me. I really couldn't do my exploring without guys like Goes-on-Trent and other people. It really is appreciated, and I really do appreciate their support. So please go and check out their YouTube channel. They are a pair of paranormal investigators, but there is no bullshit with them. If they don't catch it, they don't fake it. So what you see is real, and yeah, I really do appreciate it again, guys. So I will leave a link to their YouTube channel in the description for this video, so please go and show them some love. We now move on to two large semi-detached houses just up the road. The main house, called Harrington House, was built prior to 1871. At some point it seems it was divided into two properties, with the house on the right building an extension in recent years. I can only assume that these houses had to be evacuated for the same reason as the row of cottages opposite the mill. They have now been empty for 10 years, and the house on the right has severe water damage and mould. The family history of the house is quite interesting. The same family lived in the house from at least 1871 up until 1965, and possibly beyond, but I can't find any evidence of that. The family that lived here were called Thompson, and they owned and ran Dane Mill, also known as Upper Works. So the earliest census I can find them on is from 1871, and the head of the house is Mr. Francis Rathbone Thompson, who is aged 46, and he is a corn miller. His wife is named Susanna, and she is also aged 46. They have 5 children: William T, aged 9, Frank, aged 8, John Richard, aged 7, Harriet, aged 5, and James T, aged 2. In 1881, Francis Thompson and his family are still at Harrington House. He is now aged 56 and described as a corn miller, employing 21 men and 3 boys. His wife Susanna is also aged 56. On this census, they only have 2 of their children living with them: William T, who is now aged 19, and John Richard, aged 17. Interestingly, they are listed as millers' sons with no occupation. It seems their father was making enough money from his mill to support his children, who are of working age. They also have a domestic servant named Eliza Ford, who is 38. 10 years later, in 1891, Francis Rathbone Thompson is aged 66 and still a corn miller. His wife Susanna is now listed as aged 59. They now have 4 children living with them: William T, who is now 28, Frank, aged 26, and John K, aged 24, and they are now also corn millers, and their daughter Harriet, aged 20. They have 2 servants: Sarah Ainsworth, aged 20, who is a domestic housemaid, and 22-year-old Anne Osborne, who is a cook and domestic servant. By 1901, Francis Thompson is a widower. He is aged 75 and a retired corn miller. His son Frank is living with him. He is now 39 and a corn miller. And they have an Annie Kennedy living with them. She is aged 32 and a domestic cook. In 1911, Frank Thompson has taken on the house and mill. He is 49 and listed as corn miller and employer. His wife is named Florence Gertrude and she is 38. They have 4 children: Gerald Francis, aged 8, Sidney Brown, aged 6, Leonard Hope, aged 5, and Donald Cecil, 10 months. They have 3 servants: Kate Cooper, aged 29, Susan Jane Harris, aged 27, and 19-year-old Martha Elizabeth Snape. Moving on to 1921, and Frank Thompson is now 58, and he is listed as employer at Dane Corn Mills. His wife Florence Gertrude is 48 and she does home duties. They have 2 children at home: Donald Cecil, now aged 11, and Sylvia, aged 6, and they have a 15-year-old domestic servant named Olive Mason. I found an article dated September the 1st, 1928, regarding Florence Gertrude Thompson. Bosley lady's death. Mrs. Florence Gertrude Thompson of Harrington House, Bosley, passed away at a Buxton nursing home on Saturday night. The regret with which we make the sad announcement will, we feel sure, be shared by many, the Thompson family being well known and highly respected throughout the Macclesfield district. Mr. Frank Thompson has been a member of the Macclesfield Rural District Council for about 25 years, and up to about 18 months ago was for 2 years chairman of the Rural District Council and for several years chairman of the Guardians Finance Committee. In their loss, Mr. Thompson and family, 4 sons and 1 daughter, will have the sincere sympathy of a wide circle. The interment took place on Thursday afternoon at Bosley Church, with which the bereaved family have been prominently associated for many years. The deceased lady, who was in her 57th year, was the sister of Mr. Walter Brown, Justice of the Peace, of Upton Lodge, Macclesfield. Death of Mr. Frank Thompson, Bosley's great loss, 22nd of September 1933. Macclesfield and District, and particularly Bosley, has sustained severe loss by the death on Sunday of one of its most prominent and respected residents, Mr. Frank Thompson of Harrington House, Bosley, who passed away on Sunday at the age of 71 years, and whose funeral took place amid much regret at Bosley Churchyard on Wednesday. A native of the district, Mr. Thompson had been a leading personality in Bosley for a great number of years, and his passing leaves a gap it will be very difficult to fill. Until they were closed a few years ago, he was connected with the Bosley Corn Mills and has since been a director of the Bosley Wood Flour Company and the Bosley Pure Ice and Cold Storage Company. For 25 years he represented Bosley on the Macclesfield Rural District Council and was chairman of the latter body from 1925 to 1927. He was chairman of the Bosley Parish Council, president of the Men's Institute, president of the tennis club, and was a warden at the church. He was a very generous supporter of all the local organisations, and particularly the church. In politics, he was a staunch and loyal Conservative, and as chairman of the local association, did much valuable work in this connection. He was educated at the Modern Grammar School in Macclesfield, and his business career commenced by being articled to Messrs Sharp, Stewart and Company, engineers of Manchester. He finally joined his father's milling business at Bosley and became a director of that firm. He was a Freemason and was instituted at Eton Lodge, Congleton. He was one of the pioneers of motoring in the district and drove one of the first motor cars, a Daimler, and his interest in motoring never diminished. He was a most capable and practical engineer, civil, mechanical and electrical. The funeral on Wednesday morning was attended by representatives of all the local organisations with which he had been connected, and the church was full. The cortege was met at the church by the children from the school, and they formed a guard of honour. By 1939, Frank and Florence Thompson's eldest son, Gerald Francis, is head of the household. He is aged 37, single and listed as wood flour miller director and maintenance engineer. From this occupation description, we can see that the mill has gone from producing corn to wood flour. Also in the house are two of his brothers, Leonard Hope, aged 33, and Donald Cecil, aged 29. They are both also listed as directors of the wood flour mill and maintenance engineers. Their sister Sylvia also lives in the house. She is 24 and does unpaid domestic duties. Also, there are two children, Thomas and Henry Lever. Thomas is aged 12 and Henry aged 10. They are listed as at school, but I don't know whose children they are. There is also an Ellen Morris, aged 65, and she is a domestic servant and cook. I found a newspaper article from the 6th of April 1994 regarding the death of Donald Cecil Thompson. The funeral took place on Monday 28th of March of Donald Cecil Thompson, aged 83, of Harrington House, Bosley, whose death occurred in the Alexandra Hospital in Cheadle. He was the husband of Mrs. Margot Thompson. He was born in Bosley and he was the last of four brothers who founded Wood Treatment Limited in 1928 and was involved all his life in building the company to its present size, finally becoming president on his retirement. He was a sociable man of many interests and will be greatly missed by his family and all who knew him. The service was conducted by the Reverend P. Barrett of St. Mary the Virgin, Bosley. After finding some paperwork inside the house, I know that Donald Cecil Thompson was still living at Harrington House in 1965. He died in 1994, aged 84, but I don't know if he was still residing at the house the year he died. And he also married a Margaret Skinner in 1940 in Cheshire. Harrington House was last sold in 2021 for £350,000. It was bought by Chetco One Limited, which owned by Owain and Charles Bowden, who were the brothers of George Bowden, who was the owner of the wood flour mill where the explosion was. George Bowden was a co-director of Chetco One Limited with his brothers, but he resigned in June 2021. Let's go in. So this is the house on the right, and I won't stay in here too long because apparently the mould in here is pretty bad. So these look like they were animal pens of some sort. There are some more out in the garden. I don't know if they were dog kennels. Sure. Right next to the house. Some lockers. Nothing inside. So this just looks like it was a garage or utility of some sort. And we've got the door here into the main house. So already I can feel that the floor is pretty spongy. You can see the mould up there. Got a little downstairs bathroom here. Just have a quick look around downstairs. Yeah, the carpet is squelch, squelch, squelch. Oh my goodness. It's absolutely sodden. Oh my goodness. Look at that in there. Look at this. Nice old fireplace there. But look at the ceiling. Oh my goodness. Lovely big room now. So I can only assume that these houses were evacuated when the explosion at the mill took place. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Got a nice room here, possibly a dining room originally. Look at the fireplace. Lovely big bay window that opens out onto the garden. Right, it's got a room opposite. I don't know, maybe this was a dining room. Don't know. It's only little though. Nice 80s or 90s carpet. Onto the soggy carpet. Let's go through. Strange way to get to the kitchen. Quite a small kitchen. All the kitchen cupboard doors have been stacked in there. Goes outside. Everything's been ripped out. We'll venture upstairs, but as I said, it's mouldy and rotten, so I'm not going to stay too long. So I've got a toilet there and a bathroom. You can see all the mould, look. Good grief. Yeah, it's pretty bad. There's a bedroom there. Oh, there's a sunbed there. Is that a sunbed? You can see the windows are lovely. Yeah, it's definitely a sunbed. There's a nice fireplace there with the alcoves. Look at this bit down here. There's more stairs upstairs, but Jesus. Just a little cupboard. And a big, massive bedroom down here. Oh, look at the carpet. It's got an ensuite bathroom by the looks of it. But oh my goodness, we're not going to go in here. Not going to walk on that. So I'm just right at the top of the house now. But yeah, it's only that's where all the water's coming in. And then we've got like an attic room here. Just like an attic space. I'm not going all the way in. Right, so yeah, that is all the house. I'm not staying because it's just absolutely rank. So yeah, I've got the house next door to go and look at, and the cottages just down the road. But yeah, it's pretty bad, this house. Right, so we've got an old Mercedes here. Not sure why the boot's open. I think they've probably nicked all the tyres and the spare tyre. Right, so we're just at the adjoining house on the left, and we've got a caravan here. Don't think anyone's home. We've got a big garage with a scooter out the front. And then that bit there is the back of the mouldy house that I was in. Right, let's go in. Oh dear, we're off to a bad start already, look. Presuming this was originally a kitchen. one through. Now I do know this house has been stripped out of pretty much everything, including the banisters. It's a strange house with these arches, and it's been hard to find how old the house is. Oh, that's not creepy in the corner. Look at that. It's a nice fireplace through here. Big room. I've got to say, it is really cold in this house. So look, there's a safe. Wow. Right, I'm going to go up these stairs and see what it's like upstairs. But as you can see, there's no handrail. So as you can see, all the wood, for some reason, has been stripped off the stairs. Right, looks like it's just a bathroom in there. I've got a bedroom in here. Ooh. Look at that window. Wow. There's no one of them creepy dolls. But look at that window. Isn't that lovely? Sat there. What a view. What a lovely view. So as you can see, there's more stairs going up. We'll have a look. Oh, the smells in this room. And there's a big room down here. Again, everything's just been stripped out. It's interesting artwork. The old fireplace is gone. It's a bit of a creepy corridor, isn't it? Right, and up on the top floor, as you can see, there's no banister. So yeah, it's quite rotten up here. You can see there's a room over here. You can see the floors there, it's pretty bad. And then we've got a room here full of stuff. It's a little pokey room. There's the water tank over there, I presume. It looks like it might have been a kid's room. It's all paperwork and stuff. Right, so we've just got the basement to go down. Doesn't look creepy at all. Looks like it's been modernised down here. Oh my god. It's a fancy table. Christmas tree. Big old cupboard and a sink or something back there. That's just where they've chucked all their boxes and stuff. Yeah. Not a huge basement. Don's den. There we go. So that's the house.